the call to order the June 22nd Environmental Matters Committee meeting. And for the record, all the members are present. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we have business and miscellaneous, approval of the minutes.
I will move approval of the minutes for the June 1st meeting.
Is it June 1st? I'm seeing
The date, June 1st, 2020.
wrong one on this.
You're on Finance Committee.
Oh, that would be me. Sorry.
May 12th.
For the May 12th meeting, I'm sorry.
Do I have a second for that motion? Oh, wait, you can't. I have to second that. Second. All those in favor of approving minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have two reappointments. So
Oh, yeah.
they're both reappointments, so I don't think we need to hear from anybody on this. Is that? But we have reappointment of AP 5822 reappointment of Randy Rowell to the Environmental Commission. And then we have AP 5922, the reappointment of Willie Sampson to the Port Wardens. Any comments on either of those from the committee?
We recommend favorably.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. I'll move on to committee discussions. I'd like to invite Ms. Holden up from the Environmental Commission, who we invited to speak about the Commission's priorities. And I believe you put together a document that you...
Yeah, I have copies available if you'd like.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And can you grab a mic? Make sure the green light's on.
Now it's
There we go.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Savage, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Allison Colden. I'm currently serving as the Vice Chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. And I just want to thank you all very much for putting some time on your agenda today to hear about the Commission's 2022 environmental priorities for the city. In front of you, I've given you our list of 2022 priorities, and you'll see that there are quite a few of them. So I actually would like to start with the last one on your list, and that is recruitment. So currently the Environmental Commission is, it's comprised of 9 members, and currently we are down to 5 members. So I greatly appreciate your reappointment of our chair, Mr. Randy Rowell, or else we would have been down 5 members. So we are working with city staff to try and figure out different tactics for recruitment, but we welcome your help in identifying folks within your wards who are interested in environmental issues and serving on the Environmental Commission. We'd very much like to get our membership back up to our 9 members so that we can start tackling some of these ambitious, what we believe to be ambitious goals that we have set for our 2022 priorities, and having more hands on deck will definitely help with that. So we are, as a group, actively working through our networks to try and help identify folks, but also welcome your input, also reaching out to your constituents as well. So a few others I wanted to highlight from our list here. You'll see we have quite a number of categories, but I wanted to highlight a couple of the top ones that we've discussed as near-term priorities. First, under water quality, we understand the city staff has been working on updating their environmental inspection protocols, as well as reviewing existing city code on stormwater and erosion control at development sites. And that is something that we have been engaging with staff on, particularly as it relates recently to the Parkside Preserve project in Ward 7. A lot of concerns were brought to the Environmental Commission by our members as well as other residents of the city about sediment leaving that site. And so we've been engaging with city staff and Deputy City Manager Guild on that issue, as well as Alderman Savage. So we have made a priority that we would like to continue to collaborate with the city on that and provide feedback where possible on those sediment and erosion control measures, including possibly looking at the code and whether or not there's an appropriate level of discretion given to staff in the code, or if that needs to be more strictly spelled out as to when various actions need to be taken in response to violations. So we're putting that as a high priority on our list, along with the annual stormwater fee report. So this is something that you all discussed, I believe, at your last meeting, which we had also flagged, which is this is an annual report to be put forward on the disposition of the stormwater fees that the city collects from residents for water quality improvement projects. And that's something that we are interested in reviewing and possibly providing feedback on ways that we can maximize the return on investment from those things based on the expertise of those on our commission. The next one I'd like to highlight for you all is the much awaited city resiliency plan. We are very interested in working with Deputy City Manager Guild on that and providing feedback whenever that is available. Next is urban tree canopy, which has been and will continue to be a high priority for our commission, helping the city try and meet its goal of no net loss of tree canopy. Recently, we have reviewed a couple of different incidents that have come up. We have weighed in, for example, for a project on West Street to try and save a few specimen trees. At our last meeting, we had the city arborist come to talk about some tree removal that occurred on Compromise Street, which was a concern to some of our members and residents that we heard from. And we received really good feedback in that discussion with the city arborist in terms of some suggestions that he might have or that we had to help strengthen the code to maybe reduce the loss of tree canopy. We did review the report that the city commissioned last year on the status of tree canopy in the city, which indicated that we were still losing tree canopy. And so we think that using that report as a means to prioritize specific geographic areas within the city where we're seeing high levels of loss in our review of development projects and other activities would be a good place to start in terms of prioritizing both restoration and reforestation, as well as prioritizing the review of activities going on in those areas. Lastly, this is sort of an ongoing, actually, sorry, there's two more. Ongoing, the AEC does try to review as much as possible development projects as they come up. It has become a little bit more difficult to try and keep track of those projects. I believe that there used to be sort of an email list that went around whenever new projects would be proposed, and we're going to try and see if we can get ourselves better connected with staff and others on that so we can keep in line with when those projects come up. But basically, we do review development projects as they come through to try and make sure that they are at a minimum meeting the city's requirements for environmental site design and stormwater management. And also seeing if we can help to make suggestions to improve the things like maintaining tree canopy and specimen trees wherever possible. And lastly, litter and waste reduction. We were very excited to hear about the positive outcomes from the Truxton Park composting pilot project, and happy to hear the city was going to continue moving that forward. And we have also been working recently on researching a ban on single-use plastic bags, which were a main concern for litter purposes, but also, requiring petroleum products to produce those, also from just a general climate change impact as well. So that's something that we believe requires a little bit more research, but we are looking into that and would be happy to work with you all or other members of the council who may be interested in those topics or any of the others listed on our priorities list for this year.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, thoughts from the commission, board? Yes.
Thank you,
Alderman
Mr.
Arnett.
Chair. So it's an impressive list, but I've been thinking a lot about boards and commissions in general, and particularly boards or commissions that parallel council committees. And when I first got in environmental matters, I think Alderwoman Finlayson and I were on environmental matters our very first year. There's been sort of a waxing and waning relationship between the council and all of the boards and commissions. And lately, I think it's been more waning than waxing. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, what do we do with all these boards and commissions? And how do we make them so that they help us do our jobs, which are, I feel, pretty overwhelming if you take them conscientiously. But I'll just take an experience from myself from last night, where I attended the Maritime Advisory Board, and I was listening to a presentation from the Planning Commission on the street in parks, the water access, and the chairman went around the room and he asked me if I had any comments, observations. I said, I just come to these meetings so I can find out what the city's doing. Because at boards and commissions, Financial Advisory Commission, we hear all kinds of things that we don't get as the city council. And so I like your list. I think it's very strong. But I guess my plea and my question is, how can we make the relationship between the council and all of these boards and commissions stronger? How can we make it so that we're working partners? We can give you a heads up, like I just heard you and Rob talking about the latest kerfuffle at Parkside Preserve. But it just seems like we're ships passing in the night. And I'm not sure who's to blame there or if there's anything better we can do. But I will ask you, after going through this little diatribe or dialogue, whatever you want to call it, how do you feel about the relationship you have with the council? Do you think it could be better? Do you think you were an impediment? Stay away from us? What is your sense of it?
Thank you for the question, Alderman. I will admit that I am a relatively new member of the commission. It's my second year serving, and fortunately they saw me fit to be vice chair. But I do think that there could be a higher level of coordination. I think one of the first steps to that is making sure that we have representation from all of the wards on the commission. Right now, we are a little bit skewed. Even though we have 5 members, we are still a little bit skewed. So one of our priorities is to make sure that we have representation, or as much as possible, make sure we have representation from all of the wards. So that way I feel as though you as alderman would understand that you have a specific individual who you can communicate with on the environmental commission and can be the local voice that can be your liaison or your point of contact. One thing that we did at the beginning of this year as well, when we tried to put together this priority list, is we asked our members to reach out to their aldermen and ask them about their aldermen's priorities, environmental priorities for the year. Being that we are a bit skewed in our membership, that means there could be some, city council members who were not reached with that. I think if there's a better way for us to engage in that dialogue with you all as to your priorities and how they align with ours, I would certainly welcome that feedback. But otherwise, I'm happy to also include you all on the invitations for all of our meetings as well. I do think that we can better help each other, and if we understand your priorities, particularly as I suspect a lot of them will originate in this committee, those are things that we are happy to take back to the commission and discuss supporting in either research, helping draft things, whatever you all need from us.
So to show you how bad this might be, who is the rep from Ward 8?
Can I ask that same question?
Oh, you guys are going to test my, I was hoping that was Randy so that he could,
Eastport.
who could answer that. Do you know?
Well, Hillary would know.
Hillary's coming.
I think that might be one of our vacant wards. Yeah.
Is it Jeremy?
No, she's on the education.
Is the Eastport Ward 8 rep on the Environmental Commission?
He's mine?
I don't think that.
He's mine?
Oh, wait, sorry, she was. Yeah, it's not, there's no word specific requirements. No, we know that, we always try to make the representation on that.
I think we need to be on the mic.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I can just reiterate that. I don't think right now we have somebody on the commission who lives in Ward 8.
And I think if we could expand on that, because I think that's a good discussion to have regarding. So I think there definitely does need to be more collaboration, and as the Alderman said, it kind of has waxed and waned over the years for a variety of reasons. I think we've had sometimes I think that there have been certain folks in the city who like to work with the boards and commissions, others who don't like to hear from them unless they say what they want to hear. And I think it's important to receive feedback and recommendations from the boards, regardless of whether the folks agree with it or not. Like one example is the Transportation Board, which recommended the fare free transit, which I think a lot of us support in theory. But at this point, obviously, we haven't quite come to consensus to push that. But that really, I think that's also a good example of how that really helped to further the discussion of the particular topic and recommendation, because we've chatted a lot about that, and that is obviously on a lot of our minds moving forward. So that would definitely be, and I know sometimes these meetings are hard to make. So I think somebody from the commission is always welcome, but I think we also would welcome any kind of document if you can't attend, and we can certainly discuss that at these meetings. Because we did do that on the Transportation Committee regarding that fare free, and we heard from.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Raftovich is leaving. Are you going to come back?
Did you need to?
I don't know. We passed the reappointments. Did you have anything for us? Okay.
I did have a question for her,
you do?
however,
Okay.
because I think she would know who's representing which wards on this commission. No?
No, I don't have the full list with me right now. I mean, I
Okay.
could tell you, I think any board member, I think I could tell you off the top of my head where they live, but maybe not.
Is Randy, Mr. Rao from Ward 8?
No.
Mr. Rao is not, no.
Okay.
3, I think.
7, 5.
4? He's not mine.
His
Ann
address,
Stevenson was.
his address
she's
is in
the-
his resume. His address is in his resume on our agenda.
Randy, yeah. AKA Kenyatta's.
Eastport is vacant. That was Ann Stevenson before.
So I was going to say in that regard, I can work because the Eastport Civic Association has an eco-action committee. Barbara Beeler, I believe, is the person who heads it up, who is a very strong environmentalist. And the thing I like about that is it ties into both the civic group and the alderperson. And I do like having representation. All wards have environmental issues, tree canopy, stormwater management, so forth. And I do think that it's a good idea to have as much as possible representation for each of the wards on all the committees. I would also say in the past, unfortunately, we leave the report from the environmental matters to the very end of our agenda, and often there's not enough time. And so I would think we could promise that if we move them up in the agenda, that we would hear from them if they will come and give us a report and work with us. So,
Yeah, and that's something the Transportation Committee has started to do with the Transportation Board, so that we get their input on any kind of legislation that might be before that the committees. And just as an example, and I think so. As an example, there are a number of things on your list which I think we've talked about as a council and also as a committee in a bit, but we may not get to for quite a number of months. The one being the plastic bag ban. I know the Environmental Commission had a panel of, I think, a couple people who've done this elsewhere, talking about the various approaches. And so that might be worthwhile to give a report to this body at some point. You know, whatever your recommendations coming are out of that panel that you had. Another example I see on your list, improving the lead standards, the energy efficiency standards for buildings in the city. Because we do have legislation that was passed probably 10 plus years ago in our code, so that certainly could get updated. I think I started to do that, but then dropped it because of other things. So that's, again, another example where I think, like Alderman said, we have quite a lot to do, and we also can't be everywhere at all these meetings at once, unless you're Ross, who seems to be able to go to all these meetings. But so it's always good to be able to get those white papers and things. And speaking of that, I think we should also, Ms. Green, if you could extend an invitation to the Conservancy Board. I'd like to get an update from them at a future meeting. I think we tried to get that scheduled, but it fell through. But if we could get a report from them similarly to see what they're working on, because it's been a while since we've had a report from them.
So 2 more points quickly. I see on your list the adequate public facilities, which definitely does need work, but I can tell you there's a yin and a yang here. In the planning circles, they want to get rid of adequate public facility requirements or tame them quite a bit and expedite the planning process. And I understand where that's coming from, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it. On the other hand, adequacy of facilities had a lot to do with things like stormwater management and tree canopy and those sorts of things. Also had a lot to do with multimodal transit nodes. And so I think that there is a strong place for boards and commissions to help us sort through a legislative agenda. Now, the other point I wanted to make is the Transportation Board, I think, is a good thing to look at because they actually have code requirements. Like, for example, if you want to create a parking district as opposed to a zone, in Title 21, you actually have to start with the Transportation Board with petition, lay out what you want in your parking district, and they will make a recommendation to the Transportation Committee. So there's a very direct relationship between the board, the citizen group, and the city council committee. And so one of the things for self-preservation I would recommend to all boards and commissions is look at how you can get yourself inculcated into the code and have a requirement that we listen to you, basically. So that would be a suggestion you might want to take back to the Environmental Matters, is to look at the city code and see how strong you are in your setup there and where there might be places that you could be more completely integrated into the code. Anyway, a digression, but I think an important one for all the boards and commissions.
Did you have anything, Alderman?
Thank you, Ms. Calder. First of all, Mr. Rao lives in my ward. And I have met with him, and I should have remembered that, but thank you very much. This is a very aggressive list of priorities. I think you guys did an awesome job categorizing what's needed. I agree with my colleagues. What's the next step? Simply giving us this is great, but where do we go from here? I think there is an opportunity to, for example, with plastic bags, potential legislation. We had legislation, wasn't potential, which was probably, Alderman, was it 15 years ago?
Sam Shropshire.
With Sam Shropshire, right, that unfortunately failed at that time. but it's become a very hot issue now, and I think we might get a very different perspective. We were bombarded back then with information from outside sources, and we still would probably have that situation, but I think it's a more acceptable approach to take to cleaning the environment. So, but looking at what we've already done and building on, what we could be doing better, I think we should be looking to you guys to tell us what legislation we should be sponsoring. Your research will suggest to us what is needed in your area of concern of the environment. For example, you mentioned the Truxton Park composting. Did we ever get a report on the outcome of that? I remember hearing that it was successful, but did we get any information on how many people participated, what total impact it had?
I can answer that. Jackie Geil, Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. So I did report I think it's an email, and I did report at one Environmental Matters Committee, but we were expecting a report from the Department of Public Works. I checked in with them, and I was informed that I need to produce that report. It was the Department of Public Works project, which I kind of pushed forward, and they were already looking into composting, but then I found sites where we could actually do with it, and then pushed forward with them on the pilot project. So I need to produce that report, I was told. So I will do that. That's on my list of things to do, because I think we need it documented.
Well, so I think it's appropriate to put that on our agenda for that presentation. So, because I remember hearing that it was a success and X number of people participated, but, it's not codified anywhere that was a successful project and therefore should be expanded. That should be the next step if it was successful, and if the demographics match what our needs are.
Right. So, Alderwoman, the Truxton Site Park was made into a permanent service by the city. So that is something that's being funded by the Department of Public Works out of their waste fund. And so that's ongoing. And Public Works is going to put together a survey of all city residents regarding interest in composting. Would you do it? Where would you want it? Would it a fixed site? Do you want it door to door? And that's as a follow-up to their pilot program. That survey has not gone out yet.
So who developed the project? The Public Works put this in as part of their management efforts, or was this out of your office?
No, Public Works had investigated, first of all, a facility, creating a facility next to the solar park. And they had a consultant that did that with them, Jim Pittman. And then what sprang out of that is perhaps we should find out what the interest is in composting, and they were developing a pilot project. That was kind of languishing, and then I learned about it through Public Works and followed up with Marcia Patrick, who was in charge of that pilot program, and we got it initiated with Annapolis Compost. At the same time, Annapolis Green came to the city and said that if we put in a grant for funding for a composting site, would the city partner with them and provide that site? And I agreed to do that, supported the grant. The grant award was successful. So we had the Truxton Park site being managed by Annapolis Green for 6 months, dovetailing with the 6-month pilot project in Hunt Meadows. But we've continued, because the Truxton Park site was so popular, that was available to everyone in the city, we've continued that as a permanent program out of Public Works.
So is it at Truxton Heights or in Truxton Park?
It's in Truxton Park.
Permanent site?
That is a permanent site.
Okay, did you mention the landfill as a site?
As a potential composting facility, that our consultant, Jim Pittman, identified that site for a number of reasons and specified what we would need as far as a flow of material. The city alone does not produce enough food scraps to support a composting facility. We would need the participation of Anne Arundel County. And Marcia continues to be in discussions with Anne Arundel County about potentially designating that as one of the recipients of its food composting program.
But I think it was stated at some point during the budget process that the county doesn't have an interest at the moment.
At the moment, they don't. They have a number of contracts with other facilities, but we really require their participation to have enough material to make it viable.
Okay.
We were going to have a biofuels thing where we were going to be converting cooking fats and so forth and yard waste and everything. That was all part of the big original.
That was from Moyer
Plan.
days, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
Bob Agee was pushing that, and it sort of went by the wayside. But I thought Gavin had talked about resuscitating that.
I don't think we could do that. Well, I think the original idea was probably to use the landfill for that.
Yeah, the yard waste and so forth, but also
That was
you could
part
do
of the
bio-
energy
yeah,
part
energy part.
effort from a while ago. So, a couple of other questions. Who's judging or measuring our tree canopy? Is that the Alliance or Ms. Giles, do you know?
Yes, so our city forester, Brian Adams, in the Department of Planning and Zoning, is responsible for that. He's contracted with a service out of the University of Vermont, and they did our first tree canopy assessment, and they did our second tree canopy assessment.
When was our first one done?
I want to say 2006. So we're very much behind. We're supposed to do it every 5 years, we're supposed to. So Brian completed that 2 years ago.
I think the Alliance, and if I recall through LGAG, they're doing tree canopy measuring throughout the state.
The Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, is that what you're referring to? They have a forestry program, so they probably do some measuring as well.
So I would think that we would need to hire someone to do ours if they're doing it for everybody.
Well, we piggybacked, speaking of the partner, we piggybacked on another measurement that was going on for the Chesapeake Conservancy, thank you. Yeah, so we saved some money by piggybacking with them because they were doing a larger area, but it also could include Annapolis, so we did piggyback with them on it, because Chesapeake Conservancy does mapping. The Alliance of Chesapeake Bay may even partner with Chesapeake Conservancy, I'm not sure. I know the folks there very well, I can
If you could
contact
look
them.
into that, because I'm sure they brought it to LGAG, the fact that there is, they are measuring tree canopy, because everybody is asking the same question, whether,
Right.
we're increasing or diminishing canopy.
We're diminishing in some wards.
Pardon me?
We have diminished in some wards, like in the West Annapolis area, we've actually diminished our tree canopy there.
I think in Ward 8 as well.
And I think in Ward 8, you're right about Ward 8 as well.
Problem is we need legislation to control trees in the backyard. Right now,
On private property.
on
private
private property,
property.
we only do it in the front yard. And so some specimen trees have just been wiped out carte blanche.
But we also don't have too much funding to do new plantings, like street
There
tree
was a
plantings.
budget amendment to that effect.
Well, that was for hazardous tree removal. I'm not sure if that could be used for tree plantings as well, maybe?
Hazardous tree removal, there's specified line items for replanting, for hazardous tree removal, and for maintenance. Tree canopy preservation is even more important than tree planting because it takes a very long time to replace one large canopy tree and with smaller trees. And that's why, we try to preserve as many trees as possible.
My other question isn't a question. Under development, increase energy efficiency in our city public buildings. We would like to hear from you at budget time, because that should be an effort, an initiative that we should be pursuing. So if you guys brought this to us, then we could propose it as amendment or even prior to get it into the mayor's budget. So you guys have a significant role, and I know we've added tons more to your plate since you've been here. But I just want to say thank you, and thank you for your document, Ms. Colden. And tell Mr. Rowell that he owes you.
Well, thank you, and we certainly look forward to working with you all on these priorities. And fortunately, through today's discussion, I've heard a lot of things that align really well, and so I will take your comments about coordinating and communicating back to the commission. We have our next meeting tonight at 7 o'clock, so I will be happy to fill them all in on today's meeting. Thank you for the opportunity.
But before you go, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that this committee make sure that a permanent part of our meeting agenda is time for the Environmental Matters Commission. So we've sort of dropped it off. It's sort of waned. But I think you can see from the kinds of questions we're putting to you, there is a thirst on our part to solicit your help. My question may have somewhat had a negative start to it, but it really does. I hope you take back to the commission that we are interested in partnering and getting your help.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, so you always have an open spot on the agenda. And, we used to hear from Mr. Giblin, I think it was Mike Giblin, who was a member, and he came regularly, but I think part of the problem was it was just the time of our meeting. Yes, that's right.
Well, it doesn't always have to be the chair or the vice chair to
Right.
present to us. So you can share that wealth with all of your committee members and rotate it, because we know that the hour is usually during the time when people are working. So,
Tell them our meetings are scintillating. They ought to all come.
I'll tell them there's free drinks.
Yeah.
That's an Atlas Green.
But yeah, so definitely,
you.
I think if you come back with a few focused priorities, recommendations, that'd be helpful. Thank you for taking the time today. Next up on the agenda, I think we have some legislation. Yep, R3222, Chesapeake Bay Trust, Anne Arundel County, and City of Annapolis Watershed Restoration Grant Program Permit Fees Waiver. Ms. Guile, can you speak to this legislation?
So this is our city's second year in participating in the Chesapeake Bay Trust's Anne Arundel County Watershed Restoration Grant Program. And the city provides funds through its Watershed Restoration Fund to the trust, and the trust helps select and vet the applications that come in, and the city participates with that, and then the trust makes the ultimate decision whether to provide grants. And these grants go to not-for-profits, they go to homeowners associations, churches, communities, and there's to do stormwater restoration practices and pollution reduction. So as part of the permitting process, there are fees involved, and this legislation goes to removing those fees so that more of the grant funds may be used for the actual restoration process.
So let's back up a second so we're all on the same page. So the Watershed Restoration Fund, our stormwater fee, which we raise money through the water bills, portion of that money is going to the Chesapeake Bay Trust. And they in turn this is the same thing the county does, by the way. And then Bay Trust administers that pool of money as a grant program, right?
Correct.
And so what you're trying to do is essentially for whatever gets awarded to communities, for example, there's a whole list of, I think, projects that have been awarded locally. But for those projects, when they submit projects, designs, whatever, to the city for review, this essentially waives those permit fee requirements because it's our money, really. Well, taxpayers' money to begin with, right? It's paying the trust, giving that to the trust, and then for the fees themselves, we'd be taking the fees back to anyway, it's kind of double dipping. So this kind of just eliminates
It removes
that,
that.
right?
Right.
Is that right?
That's right, it's correct. And this year, as last year, we provided $300,000 from the stormwater fee, the Watershed Restoration Fund, to the trust for grants. And we made 5 grants.
I'm afraid I'm not clear. The fees total $9,500. And instead of taking it out of general revenue, it's coming out of the Watershed Restoration Fund. That's what I'm reading in the fiscal impact note. Am I
Right,
misunderstanding?
so it's kind of a wash.
Yeah, that's what I'm,
Yeah, it depends on where we want to pull the money from. I mean, it's all going to get paid one way or another.
this sounds like finance is taking it out of the general fund and replacing it with money from
General fund.
the restoration fund.
Yeah, the-
Okay,
For
if
the
that's,
fee.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, they're taking the, well, if this passes, currently the fees, I guess, are taken out of the watershed fund. But if this passes, the fees will be taken out of the general fund and not the restoration fund. I mean, is there,
I don't understand that, then why would we do that? Why would it come out of the general fund and not out of the restoration
I
fund?
guess the theory would be that it would make the restoration, that grant money go further. Because these are typically smaller projects. They're not like $1 million projects. They're somebody putting in a rain garden or something for, so that's, I think the theory is.
They're anywhere from, well, the ones we've granted were between $25,000 and $150,000. Many of them are in the $50,000, $75,000 range.
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely like to hear from my colleagues who've been on the finance committee. I don't necessarily feel too strongly one way or another on this. I guess there is the budget impact in that it'd be coming out of our general fund, which is already quite hammered by various expenditures. So it's not a lot of money coming out of the restoration fund, the $9,500. So I don't know.
But I think it's a more appropriate place for it to come,
Out of the,
the restoration fund. But let's get the sponsor of this legislation in here.
who is the sponsor?
You,
No, I'm a
you,
co-sponsor.
You're a co-sponsor and the mayor.
It's the mayor's. And I did not write the staff report on this. I
Well,
saw
there
it.
is no staff report. There's a fiscal
It gets a
impact
fiscal report.
note. And at the time, when I sponsored it, I wasn't aware of the fiscal impact.
I do think it's appropriate for this to come out of the water restoration fees rather than out of the, I mean, I think we're indifferent. It's taxpayers are paying for it, either as a fee or as a property tax. And it's not a lot of money either way, but trying to keep keep the money in the right buckets, it seems like this is appropriate to come out of the restoration fund.
I guess why are we waiving the fee? I'm not sure this
I
is
think
even
to make
necessary
nice
if
with
we
the
just have it
Chesapeake
come
Bay
out of the
Trust.
restoration fund like it normally would, right?
Because, well, how do we set the amount of money that gets allocated, that gets sent to the Bay Trust? Or the amount of money that gets allocated for grants through the trust? How does that amount, how much is that and how does that amount get determined?
You mean, how do we determine that we were using $300,000 out of the water restoration fund?
So that's the amount, it was $300,000?
That's the amount that we provided for grants to come out of the watershed restoration fund. We just came up with that number when we first, we thought, let's see how many grants we get in. And if it's an effective use of our money, we did that the first year. It went well, so we used the same amount. We actually had a little bit left over because one grantee actually defaulted on their grant. The money went back to the trust. So we had $385,000 to allocate this year.
Why did the finance committee recommend in favor of it?
I have no clue.
I,
I wasn't at the last finance meeting,
okay.
so I don't know.
So the two newbies on the finance committee just said if Gavin and Rob want it, we should recommend favor. I'm inclined.
I don't think I was there. Maybe I was.
I'd be
Was I there?
inclined to
I thought I was absent.
withdraw the resolution, but
Yeah, I don't
Yeah, I
understand the need if we,
You're not on there.
I know that.
well, yeah, you can.
Nudge, nudge.
Is there, so, Ms. Scott, is there any other justification, rationale, let me read through the resolution again, for doing this besides the fact that it would potentially allow the grant money to go a little further?
That is the only justification I see for it. I was not consulted on this piece of legislation.
All right, so let me read, I don't know if there's anything else,
So where did it come from? I mean, I know the mayor's name is on it and Alderman Savage, your name is on it, but this was somebody's idea.
So if it's not Gavin, it's not Rob, it's not Jackie.
I apologize, I don't know more. I saw this for the first time on your agenda. I was on vacation, perhaps, it was done while I was gone, and then I just saw it the other day.
Can you maybe check with I think maybe we should postpone because I'd like to
Yeah.
find out if this is something that the Chesapeake Bay Trust is recommending for one reason or another.
They get the money either way.
Well, they do,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to figure out where this. So it
Mr.
says
Chair, I'll
where.
move that we postpone action on R3222.
Till we get a staff report.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of postponement, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion carries. And so it does say here, whereas it is felt to be in the city's best interest to assist the CBT's efforts by waiving any permit fees associated with CBT-administered watershed restoration grant program projects that benefit the city.
But they get the money either way. It's not
They
like
do,
they're
and
gonna.
we could really just increase the total grant allocation to make up for any permit fees, right? If we estimate permits are going to cost $10,000, we could do $310,000 for grants. So, yeah, I don't know. It's
I will consult with the trust and I will get us an answer if they're behind it or what their thoughts are.
We
Okay.
love the trust. We
Yes.
don't want to make them mad, so we'll do whatever they want, but this is not very clear.
But it should be clear that it's not impacting what they get either way.
Yeah, that's my sense of it, but
Yeah. I mean, they're going to get the money. It's just which pot of money it comes out of. And that's our decision.
isn't there something at the trust this week? Or maybe it's next week? I don't know. There's a meeting on Chesapeake Avenue.
I think we should
Saturday.
get more information from the finance committee maybe too.
Was this on the agenda for finance already?
Yeah.
Yes,
first.
June the 1st.
June 1st? I didn't think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Ms. College, you might as well just stay there because next up, I think, is your report to the committee
Okay, great. We often don't have time for that. So,
for a change.
So the last committee meeting, we talked about a zero waste, either legislation or a policy. And Racine consulted with both Felicia Nolan and with Ashley
Oh,
Leonard
for events.
for events. And we were talking about city events and that we could make it'd be easier to make a requirement that city events are zero waste than putting that burden on outside people having events. We can Ashley felt that without a code change, it'd be easier just to make a policy and make recommendations for outside events. We could more easily do a code change that requires the city to have zero waste events. So anything that the city, an event that they put on, a parade or a celebration, a memorial dedication, anything like that, it would be easier to make a code change and require the city. But meanwhile, what she suggested is that we come up with a policy. So making recommendations to outsiders, when they want to have an event of a certain size, so it wouldn't have to be a really small event. And then make a list of things that the city is required to do, such as no plastic bags, no plastic bottles, compost at events if possible, select vendors who use compostable materials, their plates, forks, cups, or materials that can be reused. So we have a very draft policy that Racine provided me when I returned from vacation on Tuesday, and I've marked it up. It's not quite ready for you to see, but we will provide it to the committee for your review. See if you have any other suggestions on how we can make it stronger.
And so this would be a policy, internal policy for city events,
And we could
city-sponsored events.
City-sponsored events.
So for the
parades and concerts,
right.
anything else we put on. We could also come up with a list of recommended, the city states something to the purpose the city is trying to reduce waste in the city of Annapolis, and we make these recommendations. We highly encourage you to use when you're putting on your own event. We could attach that to an event application for other groups putting on events, some recommended measures.
But it sounded like you were also recommending that we make a code requirement that the city adopts a policy for city-sponsored projects.
That's what I'm actually saying. We could just have a policy right now, but you could consider a code change requiring the city to go to zero waste and specifying what that means, if there's a time frame in which we would have to attain zero waste events.
What does that mean?
So a zero waste event would be one in which there is no waste generated. And for example, the Annapolis Green puts on that Rotary Crab Feast every year at the stadium. It's a zero waste event. So all the materials, the plates, the cutlery, the cups are all compostable. And all of the food that is served is something that are food scraps that could go to composting. And they always have they weigh how much it is. It's a huge amount that every year is diverted from the landfill and it goes to composting. And they actually then sell the product that comes from the crab compost. Apparently, the crab compost is very, very good for your garden, especially. So there are ways to actually achieve zero waste events. Now, we have parades and things like that. People bring their own items sometimes, but we would, for events like that, we would be doing things like making more public in the invitations, signs that go up, our announcements from the city to say, please bring your own refillable water bottles, rather than plastic. We could make recommendations to the public coming to our events. But where we supply water, for example, we can provide paper receptacles, paper water products that are paper rather than plastic or glass.
May I ask, same question Alderman Arnett asked, really. So that means that everything is recyclable?
Or compostable.
Or compostable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess what would go on our special events applications, for example, would be something to the effect that all materials used must be recyclable or compostable. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes. So we're coming up with a draft policy that we need the legal department to look at, see what they think. We can give it to you to look at as well.
Well, I think maybe we should take both approaches. I think we should adopt some kind of code requirement, not just for city special events, but maybe even for city operations to strive for zero waste. Mm-hmm. And then have maybe a couple of minimum standards we want definitely in there. And then that at least puts a requirement out there that a broader policy has to be developed, which would be the detailed document that puts together.
We did initiate a Plastic-Free Annapolis campaign a couple of years ago with a grant, and it was aimed mostly at the hospitality sector. Annapolis Green was our contractor for that, where we were educating them and showing them different types of products you could use for carry out, for straws, cutlery, et cetera. Some other businesses asked if they could be part of that. And then we wanted to extend that further within the city to make all city buildings go plastic free. Like, for example, right now, we have some compostable, recyclable cups we use at water stations. We have some water stations in Gorman that you can fill your own bottle. We don't have them in City Hall. The fire department, the Office of Emergency Management uses plastic bottles still. They could be using paper bottles, water bottles. And some other materials that they use. So what we need to strive for in all our city buildings and all our city services are recyclable and compostable products.
I recall during Alderman Littman's tenure, every event, legislation for every event, he would amend it to insist there was a recyclable receptacle beside the regular receptacle.
And we do that now for parades, but we still are usually after every parade, you see how much debris is in the street. We usually get overrun with, there's never enough. They're overflowing. If you've been to Midnight Madness, the trash is overflowing. Not everyone's using their recycling. And unfortunately, when I walk down the street and I look at it, there's a lot of plastic in the trash that could be in the recycling bins. So I believe last year I worked with Public Works to make bigger signs, just ways to educate people to get the recyclables in the recycling bin. And Public Works puts out the larger recycling bins for major events.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chair, I think we should have a policy that says if anyone receives a grant in the city, they have to come before a committee to explain how the grant was used and the success of it. Because we don't hear about I mean, we hear that we get grants, but we never know the outcome, you know? And I'm not sure how the grantors receive that, you know, but I know how we should be receiving it. We should know whether there's a benefit or not, so.
So
Is
that's,
this for the watershed,
For anything.
restaurant, anything?
Anything.
so at the audit committee, Monday, I was going to raise whether we have to do a risk assessment from our community grants to determine whether or not we're actually awarding them correctly, you know, with the separation of church and state, but also whether we're getting back the required quarterly reports that are telling us the benefit to the city. Because I think we've sort of said, we gave you the money, go do good, and we don't follow up on it.
We used to have a person who did that, and that person was removed from the position, and it was never filled, so there's a void,
Yep.
you know,
Right, but we're kind of far away from the environment at this point.
so. But that was just an aside, it wasn't related
Yeah.
necessarily to this subject, but it's just something we should be aware of.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one if there's no more questions. Okay, so Ms. Colden mentioned LEED and some other energy efficiency changes we can make to our code. I actually have a meeting scheduled with our Director of Planning and Zoning for Friday to talk to him about code revisions for our building code, not just for LEED and energy efficiency, but also for building performance standards, which are all sorts of ways that you can make a building more energy efficient and more resilient. You talk about where you build, like in a flood zone, you know, how high you raise a building that is prone to flooding, maybe in a flood zone, energy efficiency, thermostat tracking, lights that go on and off when you enter a building, all sorts of things that we can build into our code and requirements, as well as making them EV ready or requiring EV chargers to be put in new residential, new apartments, condo buildings, and parking lots of a certain size or that service a certain amount of units. So there's a whole myriad of things that go into building performance standards. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about LEED and any other energy efficiency changes we can make. And it's all around being more resilient, buildings being more resilient, and in face of climate change, and also to save, you know, the use of electricity and natural gas and save money on bills. And then the no discharge zone is going into effect July 1st. So there can be no discharge of marine sanitation from any vessel into the waters of Anne Arundel County, including the harbor. The city of Annapolis falls within that. Even the vessels that have treatment on board, that treatment on board is for pathogens that are dangerous to people and wildlife, to their health, but they do not treat nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus, which are the big pollutants to our waters in the Chesapeake Bay. So this fills a gap in our goals to try to reach our pollution reductions regarding nitrogen and phosphorus. And the press release regarding that will either go out tonight or tomorrow.
May I ask, didn't we pass that legislation a while ago? So it's just being implemented
For the
So
no
this is-
discharge zone?
for the no discharge?
So that was, we had to file an application with the Environmental Protection Agency. It had to go through review through DNR and MDE, and then through EPA Region 3, and there was a long comment period. It took about 2 years. And now we're finally, the implementation date is July 1st. So there can be no discharge at all from any vessel. They have to go to a pump out facility or use a pump out boat. Everyone has to pump out.
And I assume our harbor masters.
Yes, Beth has
And
been
made
involved
aware.
from the get-go in the application, the whole process.
And a
Thank
big shout out to David Barker, the late David Barker. He was championing this, and he passed away a couple weeks ago in Michigan, I think,
Michigan,
or someplace out there. But we are giving him a citation on Monday. I think his partner is going to be here at the meeting. But yeah, it's good. I'm glad to see that's progressing, and finally it's gotten approved.
And then, The Resilience Authority is moving ahead. Dan Neese and Joanne Throw of Throw Environmental are our interim, Dan is our interim director with support of Throw Environmental. They will be doing the administrative tasks that a director, if they were in place, would be doing, such as soliciting a board of directors, getting that set up, interviewing and selecting the board of directors, then creating the bylaws, establishing, if there needs to be an office, where that office is, an initial budget, and some of the institutional and administrative tasks. And then getting into the meat and potatoes of starting to try to identify some initial projects and funding sources for them. We are at the stage in the Military Installation Resilience Review, the MER, that the city, the county, and the Naval Academy are going through right now, where they have gathered all the information about critical assets and challenges and are now starting to whittle that list down to 35 top critical assets around which resilience projects could be built. Dan and Joanne will sit in on the meeting that we have next week with the county and the Naval Academy to start discussing those 35 critical assets and prioritizing them. And they just want to, I spoke with both of them today. They think it's important that they start to understand how the three jurisdictions think about what is critical and how we start to prioritize our assets.
And so I know that Mr. Neese is the acting or interim?
He's the acting executive director.
And what is Ms.
Ms. Throw is in a
Throw's
supporting
role?
function to him.
Okay.
And he's working, in this aspect, he is an employee of Throw Environmental. So they're both Throw Environmental.
So Throw Environmental was,
They have a 9-month contract with the county. County is financing this portion of it to get the Resilience Authority started and on its feet.
are they also going to finish the resilience?
No, they're not. That's on my plate.
So that really, I was going to ask that same in-play question, gives me concern about the very people who didn't perform for us now taking over this authority.
Yeah, I think it's,
even if it's on an interim basis.
I think it's slightly different roles in the sense that the role as I guess the interim director of the Resilience Authority, right, will be trying to set up this organization and identify the funding potential and I guess prioritizing projects, but not actually identifying projects. That's what I thought the resilience plan was originally going to be, was identifying
Exactly.
projects.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's not their role, I mean, I know Mr. Neese's expertise is certainly on the financial
finance
end
area.
of things.
Mm-hmm.
But, this is kind of brought up during the budget process. I brought up the idea of allocating funding to develop an actual plan for, some of the wards that have not been looked at yet.
Yeah.
But it was mentioned that that's going to be handled by the authority. So presumably at some point, the authority is going to hire somebody, once they find money, hire somebody to put together a plan for the entire county as
Yes.
far as identifying vulnerabilities.
That
and what needs to
that
be
doesn't
done.
prevent us from taking the work that they did do and our comp plan and what we get from this military installation resilience review.
Yeah.
And creating our own plan. And I plan to feed all of that. I'm just going to go ahead because that task was not finished, and create a resilience plan for the city, incorporating some of these other plans that we've just finished. We're finishing up also a hazard flood mitigation plan in the next month. So we have a number of plans and studies that need to be all combined into one. And that can be an evergreen document that we can change over time, but at least the city will have its own resilience plan. Or climate change adaptation plan, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah. Well, I think you stated it well there. And as far as it's a plan that I think will need to change over time and we can expand upon it. But at this point, we just need to have something to look at and start with. So good.
And the last thing I'll mention is Parkside Preserve, the development on Forest Drive. We've had a number of problems there with the heavy intense rains over the last couple of weeks. We're going to have a downpour again tonight and tomorrow. I've been checking in with Public Works, making sure that they have people out there taking care of, bolstering their settling ponds. I checked in with our acting director of Public Works, and she confirmed that all of the sediment and erosion control practices are in compliance. However, they're being overwhelmed by the storms, which means that doesn't let the builder off the hook. If they still have a discharge, they should be doing more. If we can anticipate rain or what they're doing is not sufficient, they still need to do more. I'm still gathering information from Ms. Patrick. We have a meeting set up with you, Alderman Savage, and Director, the Assistant City Manager and myself for Friday. I think we're still working on a time to talk about what's going on with that site and what can be done. Ms. Patrick did tell me that there have been 6 citations levied against reliable contracting in the last several months for discharges from the site. Before Director Johnson left, he and I worked extensively on an enforcement protocol, which was not finished, but we had triggers, like so many violations, and then you would stop work order. And I think we may be at that point with this project. If, we'll see what happens again tonight, but I'm hopeful we don't have a discharge, but it's supposed to be quite a downpour. So I don't know. Also, I asked Ms. Patrick if our inspectors, now they're supposed to do perimeter inspections around the entire perimeter, but I don't know if they're looking beyond the perimeter, like say for 500 yards or feet beyond the perimeter to observe discharges that are happening. They could do that below the settling ponds to see if there are discharges into Quiet Waters Park.
Well, so what brought this up for me again was I continued over the past few months to still get complaints from people walking through the park who noticed discharges, and I sent those along to staff at various times, and I also still got complaints from the residents about dust flying in the air, and that's why last time we had this discussion, I was emphasizing with the previous director about, look, you're saying, because technically per the code, travel lanes are supposed to get stabilized with stone and filter fabric to keep down that dust, because dust is considered a discharge, right? So he was telling me that soil cement was working, and that's what they're requiring. They're not requiring a stone, but clearly that has not been working. I've still continued to get the complaints, but the city still is not requiring them to do anything else in that particular issue. But that's again just one of many issues. I'm a bit more than a bit. I'm quite upset with the fact that if it's true that the city's maintaining, Public Works is maintaining that there are no. I saw their inspection from this morning, and they did say there were no violations. I'm certainly not making this stuff up. I saw at least 20 what I would consider violations out at the site. Things that are, and I pointed out the code requirements, the standards from MDE that require these things to be done, and they're not. And so really, I think a lot of these are not arguable points. They're required in our code and the state, and MDE's verified this last time we had them out. But it's quite clear that staff is still not requiring, they're not holding them to this standard. All they're looking at are the sediment traps and what's leaving the site instead of how do you prevent the mud from getting into the traps. Traps are last line of defense along with the silt fence. So if that indeed is the position of staff, that's a grave concern. And and that's what I think I want to discuss with the city, with the rest of the city manager's office as well. Is how to move forward on this. Because again, I'm no novice to this code. And it's quite clear what it's requiring. And when I see the enforcement department not applying these, it's disturbing. I know we worked on the inspection checklist, which is good, but reviewing that for the past few months, the inspectors just routinely issue everything's okay. They check the yes box, everything looks okay, and no maintenance required. When again, I was out there, and clearly there's maintenance that could and should have been done. These are things that you're not asking for anything extreme. It's things that they could do to minimize off-site discharges. So I'm not sure why our laws aren't being used like they should. In any case, I'm rambling on, but hopefully we'll get more information on this later this week. But right. I don't know how to proceed at this point. I feel like we're rehashing. I think we did make progress. I don't want to say that we didn't make progress. I think improvements were made, but clearly when it comes to boots on the ground, it's still not working. I don't quite know why.
So the checklist was great, adding photographs was great, adding timestamp is great. But if the inspectors are ignoring deficiencies, there is no photograph, there is no write-up of the deficiency, and, you know, it just feels like it's always been the issue with the people doing the inspection. And it doesn't seem like we've done anything to address that. And we have now an additional staff person. We lost Matt Waters because of this, at least in part, and I don't know. I mean, having a checklist where people are just checking it without really doing the job is not an improvement.
And I mean, you mentioned they're walking the perimeter, but that's exactly what I did the other day because I can't set foot on the site. Nobody can unless they're official. But so I walked around and observed these. But one of the big issues I documented in my email report was off-site discharge because I'm very familiar with the site. And at the rear end of the site where it connects with quiet waters, there's an ephemeral stream. And for my colleagues' sake, the ephemeral stream means it just flows seasonally. Groundwater, you don't get a lot of water, so you often just get, in this case, it was blackened leaves. There was no channel, no bed, no erosion, so it was just blackened leaves. But now it's eroding into a full channel. It's transitioning into an intermittent stream, which means it flows every time you get rain. And so that channel is getting carved through Quiet Waters Park. It's not even on city property anymore. It's within a couple hundred feet of the property. It's being carved through that. And so if that's not addressed, that will get worse into a fully incised stream that is sending sediment down into the park. And that's on our shoulders. So a couple of issues with that. One, we need to be looking at remediation. This is indeed happening. I've seen the photographs. We have before and after photographs. Will we be looking at remediation to require the developer to fix that stream? And two, the staff needs to review the approved plans because the sediment control plans, it's approved on the basis that the discharge, the amount of water leaving the site's not going to be drastically different than what it was before development. But clearly we're seeing a drastic change where the whole stream system is starting to unravel. Mm-hmm. So there's that question about the construction. Then there's the question about once things are built, which gives me cause of concern in terms of, are we going to see the same thing continue after this is built? Are we going to see the same increase in velocities and volume of water leaving that site, continuing to unravel this ephemeral stream? And we have the code which says these things need to be looked at. But and so I personally, I think what I'd like to see is staff looking at this to see, do these plans need to be revised to make sure that we don't have such discharges that are going to be altering these stream systems?
And I'm not an engineer, but I, raised a question with Public Works is perhaps we need to have different site design and have these sediment traps and settling ponds more in the center of a site rather than on the perimeter where they have such a strong likelihood of escaping. If they were in the center, they would have more, chances for mitigation and for capture, for stormwater on-site capture.
Is your mic on?
What's that?
I just couldn't hear you.
Just say if they were centralized stormwater capture systems, then they would have more opportunities for stormwater capture on site. I'm not the engineer or a landscape site designer, but it just seems logical that you would not put them in a position where they're right on the edge of the property and have a strong likelihood of the stormwater running off. So I don't know, we need to revisit our site design requirements either.
Yeah, I do agree. And that's something I know Johnson was working on before he left. I also have been working on something. I guess I'll just put together a draft and send it to staff and my colleagues to look at.
Are there code changes?
Well, there are code changes, but again, one of the things that's so frustrating is that the code already requires that we adhere to MDE standards. Mm-hmm. Yet I've sent out 20 items documenting how the site is not in compliance with the MD standards. So the developer's not in compliance with our code now. Staff is not enforcing our current code. So why are we even going to bother passing new code if they're not even adhering to our current code? I mean, it's getting just maddening, especially with rain on the way. And tonight, I know I'm going to get more photographs tomorrow from people. We don't need this. We have a lot of other things to do. And it's just a matter of let's adhere to the code. We're not asking for anything extreme. So in any case, I guess we'll know more later this week. Any other comments, thoughts from the committee?
Mr. Chair, I sent your email earlier today. This sounds like an issue that the city manager needs to be addressing.
Yes.
We can talk about it, but unless the manager sits down with the department to figure out where the deficiencies are, nothing's going to change. So
Yes.
that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I took your comment to heart. I've copied you on an email. We're trying to set the meeting for Friday. I think it's going to be virtual, probably.
Yes,
But
I think it
we shall
is.
see. So hopefully we can get some more information at that
Okay.
time. So anything else on this topic, or do you have any other reports?
I just wanted, one of Alderman Arnett's favorite topics, trees. We have another number of initiatives to increase our tree canopy. The Replant Annapolis program that we initiated with the Watershed Stewards Program Academy, we finalized that so we can start recruiting tree troopers in communities. And to Ms. Colden's point, perhaps we need to target those communities where we're losing tree canopy to train those community members in where to plant trees, how to plant trees. And we have funding from the Department of Public Works for that tree program, and it's being administered through the Watershed Stewards Academy. They do all the training, the management, we just fund it, and they also coordinate with the city arborist, so we make sure we track where the trees are going. We were approached about a month ago 2 months ago by residents who wanted to start a group called Save Our Trees, and they're mostly interested in removing invasive English ivy from trees. So they are like-minded with me in that we need to really save the existing big trees. Planting new trees is great, but the tree canopy really comes from our large trees. So we helped some other staff working with me help them get set up, coordinate with Department of Rec and Parks and with Department of Public Works to allow them to work in Truxton Park and other parks and in our city right-of-ways to remove English ivy and what requirements there were, what permissions they needed to get. They had their first event last week in Truxton Park. I'm gathering information about how many people came, but apparently it was a big success. A lot of volunteers were there, and they decided as their first project to remove English ivy in Truxton Park. Why not start big? So they removed quite a bit of English ivy. There's another group that came to me in the last month that wants to start a community garden project. Again, would not be a city program. They just wanted support from the city and how to go about doing that. So I've connected them with all the different groups that do community gardens, and they want to address the food desert issue. And I also help them connect with HACA to develop community gardens in our projects, our HACA projects.
Excellent.
And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Gild. And any other questions for Ms. Gild?
I guess we'll get a time for the Friday morning meeting
Yes.
settled in. I did want to put a issue on the table that's upcoming. The mayor thankfully has stepped up, and we're going to probably officially incorporate the street and park at Jeremy's Way into the city inventory. Immediately, I think, though, we need to address Chesapeake Landing because it's quite evident that the bulkhead is being adversely affected by stormwater runoff from there. And one of the things that I spoke to the mayor about today is perhaps we need some kind of a rain garden installation where that water is coming off to keep it from undermining the backside of the bulkhead. So that has an environmental heads up kind of thing coming to it. Mm-hmm. The other quasi-environmental thing I learned last night is we still have not identified the electricity and the water at Truxton Park, which is just mind-boggling. Apparently BG&E and We just cannot find the source of that. I guess there's good news, bad news. It keeps the paddle boarders away from there. But still, it's hard to figure out why we can't find that source of
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah. One way to keep people out of the water.
Well, BG&E is testing individually each pier. They're going through it step by, pier by pier to test and see where, try to pinpoint the source of that electricity.
But this has been going on for months. I can't.
Oh, yes, it's been going on for much longer than that.
Well, let's add that to the list to stay on, updated on. I'd like to try to get this wrapped up. Anything else from the committee? Is there a motion to?
Tomorrow at 4:00 at Chesapeake Bay Trust is a meeting at their headquarters. I think we all received an invitation. I agreed to show there, and I think they're going to be talking about things of interest to us. If you haven't been to the new facility, it's really quite a charming venue. I think there's
We have a
going
meeting tomorrow?
yeah, ours is at 3, so I told him I might be late getting there, but since the new executive director, not new, but is a constituent 2 blocks away from me, I need to show up.
Where's the new facility? Did they
On
move?
Severn Avenue where Homer Sales used to be, down by where APS is, between 1st and 2nd Street.
So is there a motion to adjourn?
Nuh-uh.
You want us to stay?
Second, or what, did you make the motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.